Let me thank my friend from Delaware, Senator Coons. You're exactly right as you talk about the balance, and Senator Murray, you're absolutely right about the balance that we have in the budget that's come out of the Budget Committee. You know, yesterday we did something that was the right thing to do. We passed a continuing resolution, an omnibus appropriation bill. The good news is that we worked together. We got that done. It's a major improvement from what the House did, and the House, again, was acting in a very partisan, one-way direction that would have caused additional harm. I was disappointed that the bill we passed yesterday was at the sequestration levels. I'm against sequestration. I think we should substitute it for strategic reductions in the deficit. That's exactly what the budget that's coming out of the Budget Committee will do. It will substitute for sequestration a strategic way to get our budget into better balance. And that's what we need to do. The budget, as Senator Coons, you have pointed out, is our blueprint. It speaks to the priorities that we have as a nation. It's a framework. And all the elements that are necessary for a responsible budget is included in the budget document that has been brought to the floor. I'm proud to support it. It gives us the right blueprint for America's future. The most important thing first is that it does get rid of sequestration. And sequestration is across-the-board mindless cuts. It says that every priority in this country is exactly the same. Well, that's not the case. And the budget coming out of the Budget Committee does a responsible way of substituting for sequestration. Senator Murray mentioned balance, and I really want to talk about, I think this chart really points out the fact of how balanced the budget really is. The budget, the Senate Democratic budget, balances additional spending cuts, and Senator Coons, you're absolutely right, and additional cuts in what we do in the tax expenditures. We spend money through the tax code, we spend money through appropriated bills, and the budget that you've brought out balances reductions in both categories. Sequestration only applies to the appropriation process, doesn't apply to how we spend money through tax expenditures. It's interesting, this is very similar to the other bipartisan proposals that have been brought forward. We talk frequently about Simpson Bowles. Now, some of us may have disagreed with the specifics, but we thought it was the right blueprint, the right balance between spending reductions and tax expenditure reductions. And the Senate Democrat proposal is very similar to Simpson Bowles on the ratio of cuts. Actually, it has more spending cuts and it's a little bit less revenue. The Gang of Six, again, very similar. We are proud that our colleagues came together with an effort to try to bring Democrats and Republicans together. The Democratic budget in the Senate builds on that bipartisan cooperation. Very similar. When you look at the House Republicans, they are totally out of step with what is necessary in order to get our country back into balance. This provides a framework for investment. I very much appreciate, Senator Murray, the fact that you have provided ways in which we can invest in infrastructure, how we can invest in research and development, how we can invest in education, because that translates to job growth. The more jobs we create, more people pay taxes, less revenues that are used. That's how you also balance the budget. And the Senate Democratic budget, the budget coming out of the Budget Committee, provides for those types of important investments. You also protect the most vulnerable citizens. And that is so important, so important. You protect Medicare. Why? Because it's important for dignity of our seniors. You recognize that in every effort we made, I particularly appreciated the statements that were made. Senator Durbin was a major player in bringing this out, that in going in deficit reduction, we want to protect the most vulnerable. We don't want to add to the poverty of America. And the Democratic budget that you brought out carries out that commitment, protecting our most vulnerable. You also lived up to the commitments to our veterans, and I appreciate that very much. Senator Kennedy said, as we express our gratitude, we must never forget the highest appreciation is not to utter words, but to live by them. We all say how much we appreciate our veterans, our soldiers, what they've done for our country, protecting the democracy of and freedom of our country. Well, this budget does more than just say our appreciation. It acts by deeds, carrying out our commitment to the best health care for our veterans, including mental health services. And I particularly appreciate the reserve fund that is permitted, that makes eligible for more veterans for benefits and improves the efficiency of claims processing, which is particularly important in our region where so many veterans have waited way too long to get the benefits that they're entitled to. But let me just mention one last point, the huge difference. Senator Murray mentioned it. Senator Coons, you've mentioned it. The main difference here between the budget that the Democrats have brought out and the Republican budget that we've seen in the House is that this is a credible way to manage our deficit, which is the most important thing. Managing our deficit in a credible way that will get our deficit under control. It builds on the deficit reductions we've already done. We've already done since we started this debate and Simpson Bowles recommendations came out. We've already done $2.4 trillion in deficit reduction, $1.8 trillion in spending reductions, $600 billion in revenues. This is very similar to how the Simpson Bowles proposal was made. You have a plausible baseline. I'm not going to get too technical about all of this, but it means you're not using smoke and mirrors. You're using what is a realistic baseline in order to do the deficit reduction. It's achievable. It's doable. It's credible. And you deal with tax expenditures. One more point about tax expenditures, Senator Coons, because you're absolutely right. We have provisions in the spending programs of this country that invest in energy security, and that's subject to sequestration because it's an appropriation bill. But we have provisions in the tax code that give special breaks to the oil and gas industry. These are expenditures. These are revenues that we're hemorrhaging. They should be at least under the same scrutiny as the appropriation bills. And what the budget is saying is that we can get some savings from these tax expenditures. And what we use that for is to get our debt under control. And Senator Murray, you're absolutely right. One of the huge differences between the Democrats and Republicans is that the Republicans want to reduce the tax breaks for middle-income families to give bigger tax breaks for high-income families. We say we can make the tax code more efficient and have a budget that allows for the growth of the middle class and to manage our debt in a more affordable, better way. The bottom line, this budget produces $4.25 trillion over the 10-year window compared to Simpson Bowles, which was $4 trillion. It's even more deficit reduction than the Simpson Bowles proposal. It puts us on a sustainable path for a manageable deficit. Now what we need to do is negotiate and get this done for this nation. And this framework gives us that ability to do that. What Americans want is a balanced approach that allows for growth that is credible. This budget gives us that pathway, and most importantly, it will give predictability to the American economy, which is what I hear more and more as I go around. People want us to make decisions. We're prepared to make decisions. This budget gives us that pathway, and I congratulate Senator Murray and Senator Coons. I congratulate you for the work that you've done on this.